I could feel her warmth underneath the blanket that we shared. We tried to keep our distance, but as the night grew colder and wetter, we found ourselves closer and closer, until finally, we found ourselves in the middle of a kiss. Thinking back, what are the odds that I wasn't the only one there who was in love with their cousin? When I learned that my aunt's daughter, my cousin, would be coming to live with us, I had never heard of this person before, let alone met them, so this was a surprise. "What's her name? When is she coming? What is she doing here?" I asked my mom. "Her name is Christine. She'll be here in a week, and she's coming here to study." I learned that she was my age, and even though it was all very sudden, I was more excited than nervous. And true to my mom's word, after a week, she was on her way. So that day, I sat on the porch waiting, rehearsing how I was going to introduce myself. If we were going to be living together, I wanted to make a good impression. But as her car drew closer, I remember thinking, what if we don't get along? What if she locks herself away, or worse, locks me away? What if she's an annoying brat? And as I saw her pull into my street, my excitement very quickly turned to worry. As her car showed in front of my house, my heartbeat raced. Then she stepped out of the car and my jaw dropped. She was beautiful, but I didn't want to seem like a creep, just sitting there, staring. So I jumped up, fumbled my way through introducing myself, and brought her luggage inside. Once I set it down in her room, I remember sighing at the fact that her first impression of me was probably not great. Out of nowhere, "Thanks," it was Christine. She'd found her way to her room with me still inside, and that's when I realized that all my worries were for nothing. She was easy to talk to, very energetic, and we got along well. Before long, I learned she would be going to my school. Since she was new, I became her guide at school. I showed her around, introduced her to her classmates, told her all about the teachers and the drama. This was how it went for her first week. We'd go to school together, sit in class together, have lunch together, and go home together. Soon, this person, my cousin, who I didn't even know existed a week ago, became my best friend. And yet, deep down, I wished we could be more. I knew it could never happen. The world knew it couldn't happen. But love isn't a feeling you can fight. But still, I tried, I fought, and I hurt myself every day because love always wins. Then came the camping trip. As the holidays rolled around, my parents wanted to give Christine a real feel for our state, beyond just the school, so they planned a camping trip. I remember it vividly. After we got to the campsite, unpacked and set up all of our stuff, Christine and I went for a walk, exploring the forest. I don't know how long we were gone for, but by the time we decided to head back, the skies had turned dark and it began to pour with rain. That was the moment I realized we had no idea where we were or how to get back. We couldn't really tell which way was which. We just ran, looking for shelter. In the distance, we saw a cabin, rushed inside, closed the door, and slid down onto the floor, listening to the sound of our panting, our dripping clothes, and the thunder outside. We looked around, found a match and a space for a fire, and set up something to keep us warm. We were both wet and shivering, but while I had been wearing a jacket which protected my shirt from the rain, all she wore was a dress, which was now soaked and glued to her body. She wanted a towel, but all I could find was a blanket, so while she stripped and covered herself with it, I turned around, looking outside, wondering how we'd make it through the night. There was no sign this storm would stop by morning, so as hungry as we were, we decided that we'd have to spend the night there. The only problem was that there was only one blanket, the one she was wearing. "You keep the blanket, obviously. I can sleep without it," I said. "But your clothes aren't dried yet, and you'll definitely get sick," she replied. "I'll be fine," I reassured. But she wasn't having any of it. "You know what? This blanket is big enough. We could share." My heart skipped a beat. There was no way this was actually happening. "Are you sure?" I asked, half expecting her to burst out laughing and tell me it was a joke. But no. She looked me in the eyes and insisted. So, as the storm continued outside, there we were, under the blanket. She lying there while I looked at the ceiling, trying not to make things awkward. I can't sleep, but I try anyway. I remember closing my eyes, then feeling a shuffle in the blanket. I glance over at her and she's moved, a little closer. A minute later, another shuffle. She's even closer. Another few more minutes of this and now we're practically touching. Then, and I can never forget this moment, she grabbed me and kissed me. When she pulled back, she hid her face in my arms and muttered, "I love you." What were the odds that I wasn't the only one in the cabin that night who was in love with their cousin? "I love you too," I told her. We were, both of us, in shock, but elated and in love. We cuddled until we fell asleep, and when we woke up, the storm had stopped, and all we could hear was the sound of my parents looking for us. While I put out the fire, she got dressed, ran outside, and explained how we had gotten lost during the storm. And all this time, I'm thinking, was that a dream? What are we now? We were a secret. Our relationship was something we vowed not to tell anyone. At first, it wasn't difficult to keep things under wraps. We went about life as usual, making the world believe that we were just cousins who lived together and went to the same school. But between us, we were a couple. However, as our relationship grew, it became harder and harder to act like we were just relatives. We'd have to be sure that we were alone before we could do all the things a couple should be doing. And as the year went on, we started getting more and more looks, rumors, and questions. They noticed the way we acted with each other. I don't know if they ever believed me when I told them Christine and I were nothing more than just cousins, but I didn't care. We were happy. Love is love, you know? We weren't hurting anyone. What I do know is that the teachers believed me because it was during a field trip to Hawaii that they put us in the same room. And what a field trip that was. It was like a honeymoon. We went on our own little dates in our spare time, visiting malls, going to restaurants, and spent most of the time cuddling and kissing in our room. What we didn't know was that someone had seen everything. We spent 5 days in Hawaii. It was there that I held her hand for the first time, bought a girl jewelry for the first time, and spent the night together for the first time since that camping trip. I don't think we had never loved each other more, but all good things come to an end. After the trip, we went home and had to go back to pretending we were friends at best. And it became harder than ever because we had gotten a feel for what life could be like if we didn't have to pretend. And it was on our second day back at school that we were both suddenly called to the principal's office. As we sat down in front of him, he looked at us both, worried. He told us he'd heard rumors around the school about us and wanted us to make things clear. As usual, I told him we were nothing more than cousins, a line that I said so many times I might as well have believed it. But our principal, he wasn't impressed. From his drawer, he pulled out a picture and put it on his desk, in front of me and Christine. It was a picture from Hawaii, a picture of us kissing. Our teacher had hired a photographer to take photos of the class during the trip. He told us this as soon as we landed in Hawaii, and we had forgotten. So now, sitting there in front of the principal, One thing was clear. My parents were going to find out. Sooner and not later. At this point, our principal wasn't upset because we were together. He was more upset that I lied. He told me that I could love anyone I wanted, that we could trust him to not tell anyone else in the school. But he had to tell my parents. I wanted to beg, to cry, to let us tell them when we were ready. But he believed they deserved to know, if they didn't already. For the rest of school that day, we couldn't focus. We couldn't stop thinking about what would happen. Would they split us up? Send Christine back? We wanted answers to these questions, but all we got when we got home was silence. We knew they had gotten the call, but they didn't talk to us about it or about anything. What's clear was that they weren't happy about it. They didn't ask us about school, didn't look me in the eyes, and didn't tell us we were going to Grandma's that night. Looking back now, I think they were still in the middle of processing it. It was a long drive to Grandma's, made even longer by the fact that no one said a word the entire time. Then, after dinner, as my parents helped clean up, Grandma pulled Christine and I aside and asked if we were in love. What? Did Mom and Dad say something? But no, she could just tell by the way we looked at each other. What does that even look like? Christine asked. We were both on our toes, making sure we didn't slip up and tell Grandma something she wasn't ready for. But then she revealed, the way you two look at each other remind me of how your grandfather and I looked at each other. He was also my cousin. She hugged us tight and told us what we already knew. If this love only makes the world a happier place, then we'd done nothing wrong, and there was no need to worry. During the drive back, in the back seat, we held hands, knowing that whatever happened next, we had done nothing but love each other, and that Grandma would be right there to support us. And when we got home, Mom and Dad took us to the living room and told us they would too. They may not have liked the idea of our relationship, but they liked the idea of us happy. Thanks to their support, now, 2 years later, we're still together, still happy. Because love isn't something you can fight, because love always wins.